Welcome to People Potential with Amanda. Thank you for listening in today. I'm your host, Amanda Fleising, and I'll be bringing on various experts to discuss empowering individuals and organizations to achieve their full potential. Welcome to another episode of People Potential with Amanda. Today, I'm thrilled to have my guest, Tracy Paulo-Brown, on with me. She is the Director of Talent Attraction and Diversity at Rexall Pharmacy Group. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you, Amanda, for having me. So glad to be here today.
Tracy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background? I know you've been at Rexall for, I would say, over 7 years. So a bit about your journey there and your professional history and what you feel most passionate about.
Awesome. So thank you so much. Been at Rexall now for 7 years. I'm the Director of Talent Attraction and Diversity here at Rexall, and have loved every minute of it. I've been fortunate enough to have some great growth and development here. Started off as a talent attraction business partner, and then moved into a senior manager of talent attraction. And then 2 years ago, promoted to the Director of Talent Attraction and Diversity. Majority of my background has been in retail. And so I started off at Zellers way back when, for those of you who still remember Zellers, not trying to age myself.
I do.
But started there actually when I was in high school. And that's where I truly fell in love with the retail space and with the hustle and bustle and the busyness factor of working in retail. Was fortunate enough to move into Best Buy as well, where I worked there for a bit as well. Worked in the nonprofit space. And so that's truly where I got my passion for inclusion, diversity, and equity. As I was able to work with equity-seeking groups, such as moms returning to the workforce, internationally trained individuals and newcomers, individuals who had lost their jobs due to any downsizing in the economy, individuals with disabilities, individuals with addiction, and really support pre-employability skills and help them with their journey back into the Canadian workforce. And so I was able to do some of that work throughout my career as well. And then was fortunate enough to work with Target when they had their short stint in Canada. So started with them before they launched stores and was able to stay right till the end. And I worked there in multiple capacities before joining Rexall over the last 7 years. So that's a little bit about me and sort of my journey so far.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing. And like, you bring so much wonderful experience, like a depth of experience in retail, but also that diversity, equity, and inclusion side. And it's just such a wonderful thing to bring to the group. And I think a great match with your title, which includes diversity for the last 2 years. So let's jump into how has diversity, equity, and inclusion changed over the last, let's say, 5 years, or even within the last 2 years, from what you've seen?
And that's a really interesting question, because, you know, when I think of like what diversity meant 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, you know, you really think of the efforts that have been put in from different folks to ensure representation. So you see a lot of like representation mattering. You see a lot of movement in a marketing perspective and seeing more of that representation through marketing, seeing a lot more representation from an employability standpoint, and really having that focus for equity-seeking groups. And, you know, when I think of equity-seeking groups, you know, that's women, people of color, people with disabilities, members of the LGBTQ plus community, et cetera. You know, you started to see a lot of movements coming into fruition. So things like, you know, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, and then even most recently with the public death of George Floyd, with the burial sites of Indigenous children. You can see that, you know, as much as representation does matter, and that's, you know, from a diversity and inclusion lens, we have to start looking at different aspects now. So things like belonging, that feeling of being welcomed for who you are and what you bring to the table. You think of justice being a big one right now, which is that reparation, that restoring of different individuals and their rights throughout, different communities and throughout, society. And then you also think of equity and that fair treatment for all, while recognizing and removing barriers for all people. And so you definitely have seen that huge shift of what people are expecting. Like, representation is not movement, that's an expectation. Shattering of glass ceilings, that's not a movement, that is expectation. Performative measures. And so what you're seeing from different organizations, whether they're putting up black squares or they're putting up pride flags, folks are looking beyond just that piece. They want to know, what are you doing within your organization? What are you doing in order to effect that change? What are you doing in order to, make differences? Like, you can't be posting things externally and then keeping things status quo internally. That is unacceptable. That is not something that folks are looking for any longer. Folks are looking for people to put their actions, where their words are. There's that expectation. People are woke now. So I use that term, people are woke, and they're expecting leaders and organizations to do better. And trust me, they're asking for receipts. They want to see what that looks like.
Absolutely. Now is the time, and organizations needed to take action yesterday. But as you said, like, people are certainly woke, and it's very easy to do the checks and balance. You can see online if it's performative or if it's real. You can easily see, like, what kind of team members do they have, what kind of efforts are really happening, and then you can speak to people at the company and what is the culture like. And that brings me to the point, my second question is, how do the DE&I and B, so we're adding the belonging. I don't know if we add in a J for justice, but I really do think that is an important point to bring up and to keep discussing. But how do all those efforts impact the work culture that you've seen at Rexall and the employee experience overall?
And that's a really good question. I would say that, like, here at Rexall, we know that we are better together. How we serve our customers, how we serve our partners, how we serve our patients, just truly showcases the best work that we know we bring to the table. And we know that when everyone can bring, their best, their most authentic and their true selves to work and be valued and recognized and rewarded, that we're going to see that come into fruition. Our connected, inclusive culture, how we celebrate our lived experiences, how we celebrate our backgrounds, how we celebrate, those expertise, really helps us win as one team. How we leverages those differences really distinguish us and bring out the best in us as well. We've created a space that truly allows us to bring and be and embrace and respect each other truly as we are. And we noticed that drives performance, right? Differences drive performance. Homogeneity does not drive performance. And beyond performance, it truly is that right thing to do. I think, when we look at how we've brought those things to life, I think of things like, our inclusive interview process, and I'll dive a little bit deeper on that. Our hiring slates, our bias disruption, in succession planning and performance management sessions. We've recently, in the last 2 years, we built and launched 4 ERGs across our organization, which we call internally Inclusion and Diversity Networks. Our inclusion and diversity networks have been such a catalyst for building, a true community at Rexall and across our parent company as well. So McKesson and our sister organizations, our IDNs have not only created awareness, but they've also created education across a multitude of topics, whether that's racial injustice. So, this Monday it was the elimination of racial discrimination as an example. We held a session where we had individuals that spoke about the topic, and they came from different racial backgrounds and spoke about what that looked like for them. And from an education standpoint, it really brings these topics into fruition. So again, it's not just about making that posting and saying, this is what we're doing, but we're having these conversations. And, the president of Rexall was in attendance, president of McKesson was in attendance as well, our CEO at McKesson. So you're seeing those differences and you're seeing these conversations be had. These IDNs also, supported certain things, like we had a marketplace last year during Indigenous Awareness Month, where we had different Indigenous entrepreneurs come through and talk about their products, right? And really be able to talk about the different things that they do and that they bring to the table. And then we look at how we can partner them with different merchants, across the Rexall and McKesson and Well.ca network, and see how can we, support, Indigenous entrepreneurs. We did the same thing for Black History Month for Black entrepreneurs. And then how do we connect them, with different teams across the business, so that number one, we're supporting equity seeking groups. Number two, we're supporting local. Number three, folks are having seats at the table, and how we can create, that product to come into our stores, right? And really help support bring this to life. And again, these are just some like little things that I can think of from the top of my head. I'm sure if I scratch the surface a little bit more, I can probably dig a little bit deeper and find some more. But that's just to give you a little bit of that glimpse.
I mean, it's crazy that this is just the surface, because it's a lot more than many other companies do. And I think even going to this extent is what many could aspire to as a first step. You've given so many amazing examples of concrete actions and how you're really walking the talk. You have executive sponsorship within the initiatives, executive involvement, and it comes from the entire organization as a whole, and you're having like specific activities. I love it. I love all the examples. I can't wait to share it with our audience. And really, if anyone has questions, I'd drive them to reach out to you, Tracy, as an expert, because you and the team at Rexall have such an amazing experience, and the way you're actually putting in place processes is incredible. And I think it's something we could all aspire to. So I'm so happy that you shared just a little bit, just the tip of the iceberg with us. And it just gives us a window into what you guys are doing at Rexall. The All-In campaign is not just talk, and the different initiatives that you have. So it's not just marketing, and it's not performative. And I know that having spoken to you and a few other people at Rexall, so I really commend you guys on the wonderful work that you're doing. And it shows when you go into the stores, it shows when you talk to anyone, or when you shop online. And we see it, of course, on social media as well, but it's not just social media. So that's the important aspect. Let's dive into hiring. So when it comes to hiring, what should HR pros be more conscious of to make sure they're really promoting diversity in their teams? So we, of course, know there's unconscious bias. So we have to flip that around and become conscious of, what could happen, where might I have some unconscious bias, and be aware. So what tips or, what best practices do you have that you could share with others?
That's a really good question. I'll tell you that, like, here at Rexall, our vision is to be a place where everyone can bring, and unlock their #all, right? So, when you look at that from a D&I practice or DE&I practice, like, this needs to be a culture shift. But that's not just the HR department's responsibility. That's everybody's responsibility. And so, I think of the success that we've achieved, and it really started with listening to the true needs of our employees. And that's through like our employee opinion surveys and our pulse surveys, and then really looking at how we can craft the tools and the resources and the support that requires in order to make that happen. And so, when we look at that, our talent attraction team, specifically, we looked at re-engineering our selection process. And we really concentrated on this emphasis of culture add. And so for many of you, you've heard the term culture fit. It was a term that was coined in like the early, 2000s, I think, which there was this true focus on culture fit. And the unfortunate part with culture fit is that you start to look at for people that, fit the organization. Well, if your organization is very homogenous to a specific group, well, guess what? To your point, you're going to see that unconscious bias components that come through. Our focus has really been on culture add, really looking at individuals that are going to bring a different aspect in a different space, a different thought process, different experiences to the table. Because with that diversity in thought, comes innovation, comes thought leadership, right? And those are, truly big components when you're looking at winning, especially in a competitive work environment. Some of the other things that we looked at and how we really, I would say doubled down on the culture add space was, starting off with looking at how we can create gender neutral and age neutral job descriptions, right? Looking at how we can do the same for our job postings. Looking at diverse candidate slates. So for positions, if we're truly trying to make a difference, we have to be thoughtful about the candidates that we are procuring into the business, right? And so again, that starts with talent attraction. You look at that inclusive interview process. And for us, and I talked about the inclusive interview process, what that means here at Rexall is that we don't have just one person making a hiring decision. We have hiring teams, and we try to make those teams as diverse as possible. So again, you have the diversity of thought. And so you have those diverse individuals coming through, but then you have the diversity of thought in the selection process. We have hiring guides, and these hiring guides have specific questions. These questions are all benchmarked to our values. And so we call them our I care and our I lead values, right? So these questions are benchmarked to that. We have behavioral anchored rating scales that are benchmarked to that as well. And the idea behind that is to truly create sort of that opportunity that ensures that we're able to rate individuals objectively throughout the interview process as well. And then, last but definitely not least, and this is not my plug for Success Finder, there's the data, right? So all of this is that qualitative component that comes into play. But now how do we look at things from a data and objective kind of perspective? And that would be when Success Finder comes into play, as Success Finder will allow us that opportunity to look at, whether that's benchmarks, whether that's behaviors, and be able to say, as much as this is what you saw in the interview process, this is what somebody inherently comes with as a part of their behavioral DNA. And so given their behavioral DNA, plus of the experiences that we observed through our inclusive interview process, are we making those best hiring decisions that are obviously anchored on our culture add, perspective? And this is just one part of that. We've also created, different areas from an interviewing perspective where we've allowed individuals the choice of either going through a video interview process, which is a one-way pre-recorded video interview, which are the exact same questions that we would ask through the pre-screen. And if you think about autonomy in the interview process, where individuals are working throughout the day, they may have family responsibilities, after work, interviewing during 9 to 5 may be a little bit more challenging. It gives individuals that opportunity to make that decision. They can interview at 6 a.m. They can interview at 11 p.m. We always say you can have, business up top, party in the bottom. Nobody knows, right? Because you have the ability to interview on your time, at your pace, and with your individuality as well. We've also created different marketing campaigns, which, you've alluded to as well. And our marketing campaigns are really meant to also talk about the different facets of Rexall. And so we have Humans of Rexall, for an example. And the idea of Humans of Rexall was a play of Humans of New York. I'm not sure if you've seen Humans of New York, Amanda.
Yeah.
And so the idea is a play on that Humans of New York with the Humans of Rexall. So we're talking to, different folks throughout the organization, regardless of what their titles are, and allows them to talk about who they are outside of the workplace and how Rexall has truly allowed them to be and bring and unlock their all. We have something called Talent Tuesdays. Talent Tuesdays really focuses on growth and development within the organization and speaks to different individuals who, to quote Drake, started from the bottom, now they're here, right? So how have they seen that growth and development perspective throughout the organization, and how Rexall has empowered them? And that, growth doesn't always have to be, lateral. Like, there can be horizontal growth as well. We call that lattice growth, right? So you're not just seeing upward trajectory. There's that vertical trajectory that exists as well. I've been fortunate enough to bring folks from stores onto my team. I just promoted a couple of folks from stores that were front store managers into talent attraction partners on the team. And this is due to, their experience that they had, and the support of Success Finder was able to validate, that this would be a great career move for them as well. And so, without me giving away the baby with the bathwater, this is sort of some of the things that we've been able to accomplish so far.
That's amazing. I mean, you guys have such a strong HR team in general, and you have all these initiatives going on. And I love, of course, that you bring the data side to it. So to help counteract the more qualitative aspects. And you also have all these guides and processes that you follow to really make sure you're being as objective and fair as possible. But then looking at you, Rexall has very strong values. And of course, you want to bring culture bring more innovation, bring more diversity in thinking. But how do you manage that with also wanting to maintain your corporate values and hire and promote people that really represent what Rexall embodies?
And I would say, such a great question. And a big part of that, starts with that attraction process, right? So if you think about our interview guides being benchmarked on our I care and our I lead values. And so I care, standing for, and we've actually rebranded it to I2 care. So integrity and inclusion, and then customer first, accountability, respect and excellence being sort of the major values here. And so that is sort of our pre-screen questions. They're anchored on, those values. And then as individuals move on through the interview process, then we have them anchored on I lead. Which, has a lot of more, I'd say, leadership driven and leadership focused, components that come along with that. And even as an individual grows from, the interview process and gets selected and hired, we have a performance and development process here at Rexall where we look at our goals and objectives from a quarterly perspective. And so individuals are putting in their goals and their objectives from a quarterly perspective, and their goals and objectives are not just focused on performance, they're focused on leadership behaviors as well. And I'd say the benefit of that is they're also anchored to our I lead values and our I lead competencies. And the idea behind that is that individuals now have the ability to focus on not just meeting performance objectives, but how they're meeting those leadership objectives as well. And, they're able to create different projects and different processes and even look at their involvement in different parts of the organization that will help them be able to get from where they are today to where they want to be in the future. And I think that by having these kind of structured programs in place and having leaders that are dialed in to providing that feedback. And, one of the things we always say here is like, folks shouldn't be surprised about where they land when it comes to their performance, because having these quarterly reviews and having these quarterly discussions and these one-on-one discussions on a more regular basis, helps individuals truly understand, where they stand to, where they're going to be at the end of the year. So there's less of a surprise versus, you have that one discussion at the end of the year that wraps the whole year in a bow. And, some folks truly get surprised about what that may look like for them. And so I'd say that has truly helped us get from, that culture, from a couple of years ago to looking at that aspirational culture where you have individuals who are dialed into their performance, who understand where they are, who know where they want to be. We leverage things like our Success Finder self reports, where we launch your self report. And that also helps you from an I lead goal perspective, where you can say, okay, this is where I know I have high preferences for that come naturally, come easy to me. These are some low preferences that maybe don't come as easy to me. And a part of my job might be some of these skill sets. And so how do we focus on these behaviors? How do we have like a tied in focus to our I lead behaviors into my Success Finder report that could then help us create that movement?
I love having the clarity, like the self-awareness, clarity and objectives, quarterly reviews versus the once a year, which could potentially be a surprise to some. I love that. I personally am a big fan of like quarterly and even like ongoing coaching that you could have, like knowing yourself with your manager, knowing what is this person specifically working on in terms of like business objectives, but then there's also those behavioral objectives and behavioral shifts, and also making sure you're focusing on your strengths too, that strengths-based approach where what got you here will still help propulse you to the next level. And of course, there are different elements that you need to go and bring in, but also like not forgetting what you're naturally really strong at and most efficient at and takes the least amount of energy. Like let's still bring that in there and make sure you're maximizing it. How do you do that for team building? So how much focus do you guys really put on team building at Rexall? What are some of the tactics that you might use to build high-performing and diverse teams?
That's such a wonderful question. And I think, starting off from looking at, that journey of an employee and from that employee experience perspective, as we look at onboarding different individuals, we have this award-winning onboarding program that we created that, truly, creates this team cohesion as we have individuals who are selected as mentors, individuals who kind of support the onboarding program as individuals enter into the business. So that starts, from entry into the organization. And even going before that, as we look at selecting individuals into the organization, going back to that culture ad, we're evaluating different profiles within the organization and saying, I can even talk about my own team, selecting the individuals we selected into my team. That was me, looking at our BI tool, through Success Finder and saying, okay, this is, what my high preferences are. These are my lows. These are who we currently have on the team. And then looking at the additional individuals we were looking to add on the team and seeing where their highs and lows were and trying to create that balance, right? Where you have a balanced team that, has that full all-rounded sort of scope, right? So, it starts from looking at that piece to then being able to onboard individuals and create mentorship type of relationships within the team, where it's not just the leader that's responsible for the onboarding. The peers are also like, there's peer responsibility within the onboarding process, which also creates and cultivates, those relationships, which I think are super, duper important. We also encourage, team meetings. And so we do see a lot of our departments having those team meetings on a regular basis. And, we even have folks that have departmental meetings, whether that's weekly or bi-weekly. And especially in a COVID environment, where before I'd say, being in the office, there's a lot more water cooler talk, or there's people that you're able to meet and see in the hallways and greet, how do you still create that fraternity and that social focus? And so, those are some of the things that we've been able to do in like departmentally, but then also creating different interdepartmental, I'd say interdepartmental relationships as well. And some of the things that we did, especially during the COVID period, is we did sort of monthly gatherings from an all team perspective so that we can get more visibility into what's happening throughout the organization, right? So from a financial perspective, from an HR perspective, from a marketing perspective, a strategy perspective, a pharmacy perspective, we had these updates, and it truly helped keep, us in tune with what was happening throughout the organization, especially during a time where there was a lot more uncertainty. And I would definitely say that that truly helped with bringing sort of the teams together and ensuring that we were doubling down on our efforts. I'd say especially considering that we never closed our stores. Our stores stayed open the entire time throughout the pandemic. We continued, powering along at our Rexall Support Center and supporting the stores. And so now more than ever, that team cohesion was very important to ensure that we created and continued with that. And I'd say, now as we look at the evolution, return to work, that's sort of the big focus now, right? With everybody is, what does return to work look like? And, one of the things I'm just pleased to talk about is Rexall's sort of change in mentality as it pertains to, the future of work. And, adopting this idea that hybrid work is sort of the way to go, and that individuals do not need to show their worth by being in an office all day, every day, and that their worth can be showcased. The last 2 years we've showed, that we can still do our jobs wherever we are. And so the hybrid work model and the work environment, truly showcasing that office is a destination. It does not need to be a place where people are shown to be working. They can go to the office as more of it being a destination, whether it's brainstorming meetings or it's, one-on-one meetings or performance meetings or quarterly goal meetings, all department meetings or team meetings. Those are the reasons why you would want to be going into the office. Like if you have sort of a regular day, you can have that regular day and do that from home, and sort of really creating that hybrid workspace. And, when you think about that, even from a DE&I perspective, you think of the impact, especially on women, that COVID has taken, with a lot more females stepping out of the work environment because of, school closures, daycare closures, and sort of the responsibilities really kind of being more balanced onto the women. Not saying there's a lot of really cool parents out there that are not women that are still holding down the fort, but the reality in the data showcases that women have taken more of that brunt hit when it comes to that space. And, to see that Rexall has taken that step and that leap to really look at, that hybrid work environment and ensure that folks have the opportunity to choose, when and where they're going to be working. And they get to kind of work their day. That's another big perk that we have here at Rexall, where you don't have to be at your desk 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. There's that flexibility with your day, especially for those. I got to drop off my son at a bus stop at, 9 o'clock in the morning. So that may not be that I'm not by my desk until 9:30, right? And then pick up from the bus stop happens at 3 o'clock, which means I have another pit stop that I need to take from that period, right? And so, how are we creating those spaces, and how are we creating those environments for individuals to thrive? And I'm so proud to announce that, I believe it was last week or 2 weeks ago, we were recognized as being one of the best workplaces to work for women. And these are just, again, very small, just concepts that I'm speaking through that have really helped us be, that workplace that has really allowed and empowered women to be successful here at Rexall.
That's incredible. Thanks so much for sharing that, Tracy. I know at Success Finder, we operate quite similarly with the return to work idea and hybrid, and that we're using the office as a destination, and we're all navigating that new reality of hybrid and how to be inclusive of people that might choose not to go into the office. So if you're having a team meeting, but 1 or 2 people can't make it into the office, what's the tech behind that? Can I see everyone's face? You don't all need to be there for every single meeting, or it's okay. Like some people can't, and that is also fine. They can still do the same work and still participate in the same way. So creating this new environment where we went from being in the office every day to all of a sudden working from home, and now finding that flow. Some people prefer to work at the office because they might not have the best home setup. They might be more extroverted and really look for that social interaction, that like one-to-one connection that they could have, but others might be much more productive at home. They might need the additional flexibility. And it's amazing to see such a large company like Rexall that is able to implement all these initiatives throughout the company and have the same flexibility as a smaller company like ours. So I really, I think it's an inspirational to a lot of other large organizations. I am hearing through the grapevine that many are calling the workforce back to the office for back to a 9 to 5. I'll be surprised if that will work really well. I don't anticipate everyone wanting to do that, because after 2 years, we've seen, as you and I were talking, sometimes there's even better productivity from home. And it's become an expectation to have that flexibility in your workspace and in your schedule. So I think many companies will find themselves having to adapt, and it'll be quite a challenge to go back to exactly the way that it was before.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more.
So let's wrap this up with my final signature question. And it's a bit more personal, a bit more about you, Tracy. How do you unlock your own potential? So what works to help you unlock the best you at work, in life? Like, what are some your best tips and tricks that you've found over the years?
I honestly truly believe that it starts with, one major thing, which is self-awareness. And I think we touched upon that at the beginning of this, which is, really knowing who you are, and having a dialed in understanding of what, your signature strengths are, and what they aren't. And, I think of my journey here at Rexall, I've probably learned more in the last 7 years than I have in my entire career combined. I've probably gone through more development and growth in the last 7 years than I've done in my entire career combined. And I've been lucky to have amazing leaders that have empowered me and have supported me and encouraged me throughout my entire career, and have sponsored me as a woman to continue to grow and develop myself throughout my career. But I think about that self-awareness piece being really a true catalyst. I'll never forget having my Success Finder debrief done by Frank, 5 years ago, where, I initially was like, oh my God, he has way too much knowledge on who I am as a person. Like, this is a lot. But then, really digging deep inside and seeing sort of what are the signature strengths that I brought to the table that I never focused on, but also having that ability to now focus on those opportunities for growth and development, and really knowing, these are areas that don't come naturally to me. And so how do you focus on those? How do you double down on those areas and have those true focus? And I probably wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that debrief. It was such a turning point in my career to really have that true self-awareness and understanding of not only who I am as a professional, but, who I am as a person. And I would say it definitely starts there. And I'd say from there, it's really focusing on growth. And I think I had a really interesting definition of what success was. To me, was perfection. Success was, doing everything right. Success is, performance. And the last 2 years have shown me that that is a flawed definition of success. And, with things moving and shaking and changing and completely being outside of your control, how do you then be able to motivate yourself and others around you when your definition of what you believe is success is completely outside of your control? And so redefining success, I think, has really been a true, I'd say, journey that I've been on over the last 2 years. I can't tell you I'm there yet. I'm still working on what that looks like for me. But I think even just redefining that definition is something that has allowed me to continue to unlock my potential, because by having a true definition of success does not allow you to, explore what other opportunities may look like, as well. And then I'd say last but not least, really embracing failure. I think that in the last couple of years, that has truly been something that I've struggled with. And you do 100 things well, and that one thing you not do well becomes the bane of your existence and becomes your focus area. And really looking at that one thing, or that 2 things, or those 10 things, and really understanding what the growth and the gift is from that. And my leader Tunde, he's always asking me, like, what's the gift? And at first I'm like, come on, man, like, there is no gift. And as I've kind of dialed into that space, really looking at things from, failure isn't always a bad thing. Making mistakes isn't always a bad thing. What is the gift in that piece? What is the growth in that piece? And anytime you're comfortable, you are not growing, you're stagnant. And, one of the biggest things for me is that growth and development mindset. And part of that comes with embracing failure, embracing disappointment, and truly looking at what that gift means to me, means to my team, means to my organization.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, Tracy. I love the gift part. It gets usually framed as like you learn, but so we usually say you grow or you learn, but here it could be shifted to you grow or you get a gift. And that gift is really learning. And as humans, we strive to keep growing. We need to be in motion and have that development. And I think that self-awareness piece is amazing, that you've been able to anchor from that and keep revisiting what are your strengths, where are potential blind spots, and like really dive and embrace that to its fullest towards achieving your full potential. And it's a continuous journey. And I thank you so much for sharing it with us. And those are some really inspirational words that I think we'll all be able to reflect on.
Awesome. Well, this has been absolutely fun and different. Never done this before. So appreciate you inviting me on today. And I'm super looking forward to what folks' thoughts are on it.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Thanks for joining us. People could reach out to Tracy if you want to give her some positive feedback on her first podcast experience. We'll link her LinkedIn profile in the show notes. And once again, thanks so much, Tracy.
Pleasure's all mine. Have a good one, Amanda.
Thanks for joining us on People Potential with Amanda. I appreciate each and every single listen and view. If you've enjoyed this content, it would really mean the world if you could leave us a 5-star review. This will make a huge impact in increasing the visibility of this podcast, on top of brightening the day of a few people here at Success Finder who work really hard behind the scenes to make this all happen. We're continuously working on new episodes, so be sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss a thing. Until next time, stay curious.